It began with a message that no one on Earth could have predicted, of communication that rippled through the galaxy like a shockwave. For millennia, the galaxy's most powerful civilizations had ruled from their ancient thrones, judging and observing every species with the cold, detached gaze of those who believed themselves eternal. Humanity, small and young, had never been called to the Galactic Court before. Yet now, without warning, Earth's government received an encrypted transmission that was unlike any before it. The message, brief and curt, arrived in the dead of night, and its contents left every world leader on Earth in a dazed silence. The Galactic Court has issued a summons to humanity. Representation required within 72 hours. Failure to comply will result in immediate sanction. At first it was believed to be a mistake, some sort of malfunctioning data transmission. After all, humanity had never interacted directly with the Galactic Court. They had simply existed, expanding their colonies, sending probes, exploring the depths of space. But never once had they been in the spotlight of galactic politics. The ancient empires of the universe had watched humanity with either contempt or indifference, waiting to see if the species would burn itself out as so many others had. But now something had changed. Someone, or something, had decided it was time for Earth to answer. In the halls of power, panic mixed with intrigue. There was no protocol for this, no guidebook on how to respond to such a summons. The representatives of ancient species, beings whose civilizations spanned millennia, had faced the Galactic Court before, each one prepared by generations of experience and tradition. But Earth was a newcomer, barely out of its cradle. The political world was in chaos, and so was the military. Some argued that they should prepare for war, that the summons might be a prelude to a demand for submission. Others, more cautiously, suggested that it could be a diplomatic test, a challenge to see if humanity was capable of playing with the big players. In the end, it was decided that a small delegation would travel to the core of the galaxy. They would be humans who represented Earth's most advanced minds, those who could speak for humanity's spirit, philosophy, and ambitions. They would not go with armies or fleets, for they had none that could stand against the ancient powers. Instead, they would bring knowledge, diplomacy, and their most persuasive voice. The voice of a species that had defied all odds. Dr. Ilara Monroe was among the chosen few. A historian by trade, her understanding of humanity's rise was unparalleled. Calm, measured, and composed, she was a perfect representative of Earth's aspirations. She had seen the wars, the chaos, the struggles that had once nearly torn humanity apart. But she had also seen humanity's resilience, the way they clawed their way through every disaster, emerging stronger each time. As the clock ticked down, Ilara, along with her colleagues, prepared for an uncertain journey into the heart of the galaxy. They were not just representing Earth. They were representing every human who had ever dared to dream beyond their homeworld. And somewhere deep inside, Ilara felt the weight of that responsibility settle on her shoulders. The universe had been watching. Now, humanity would finally speak. The journey to the Galactic Court was unlike any other. Humanity had sent probes to distant stars, built ships that explored the deepest reaches of space, but this journey was different. This was not exploration. It was a pilgrimage, a march into the heart of the galaxy's most powerful institution, and no one knew what awaited them there. Dr. Ilara Monroe stood at the helm of the diplomatic ship as it glided through the heart of the galactic core. Her fingers brushed the cool surface of the control panel, though her mind was far from the ship's technology. The vastness of space stretched out before her, a canvas of swirling nebulae and ancient stars, far older than the human race itself. The core was a place where time seemed to slow, where the galaxy's powers seemed to gather like an unspoken storm. As the ship approached the Nexus, the location of the Galactic Court, the tension in the crew was palpable. The human delegation had been briefed for weeks on what they might face. They were told that the court was home to the galaxy's most powerful species, those who had lived through millennia of warfare, diplomacy, and intrigue. Many of these beings were older than human civilization itself. They were creatures of light and thought, beings that could manipulate the very fabric of reality, while others were enormous, unknowable shapes made from elements beyond human understanding. Some could move between the stars as easily as humans walked down the street. The ship's sensors began to pick up strange, silent signals as they entered the court's space. Distorted waves of light and sound surrounded them, an otherworldly hum vibrating through the hull. Ilara's stomach tightened as she looked out the window. Before her, a massive station loomed, a structure built into the very fabric of space, impossibly large and complex. It was surrounded by an ethereal glow, pulsing with a life of its own. It was here, at the nexus, where the fate of entire civilizations had been decided for thousands of years. Every decision made in this place rippled across the galaxy, affecting everything from trade to war to the very survival of species. The Galactic Court was not just a gathering of minds. It was a test of power, of intellect, and of influence. And now, humanity was being thrust into its center. As their ship docked at the Nexus, the crew gathered in the main hall. The doors slid open, revealing a vast chamber of pure light. There were no walls, no floor beneath them, just a suspended platform, hovering in the midst of the galaxy itself. The air was thick with the weight of eons. There were thousands of beings already present, their forms varying from translucent ethereal shapes to massive, shifting creatures that seemed to flicker in and out of existence. Ilara's gaze swept across the room, trying to make sense of the incomprehensible. The presence of these beings felt overwhelming. There were creatures whose intelligence stretched beyond human capacity, whose minds could process entire galaxies in an instant. And yet, despite the weight of their presence, there was something unsettling about the humans being here. They were small. They were fragile. But as the delegation moved forward, Ilara reminded herself of one truth. Humanity had survived against all odds. The silence was deafening as they approached the center of the room, where a massive daze awaited them. It was here that the most powerful beings in the galaxy would sit in judgment. But for now, as Ilara stood at the edge of that platform, she couldn't help but wonder if humanity's presence here was not a mistake, but a signal that they had arrived. And nothing would ever be the same again. The Galactic Court was not a place for idle chatter or diplomacy. The beings that filled the immense chamber regarded humanity with a quiet, watchful scrutiny as they awaited the start of the proceedings. The assembly, composed of species whose lifespans spanned millennia and minds could manipulate concepts beyond human comprehension, stood in perfect silence. A hush fell over the room, and all eyes were drawn to the days where the judgment would begin. Dr. Ilara Monroe, along with her colleagues, stood at the edge of the platform, facing the center where a colossal hologram flickered into life. It shimmered for a moment, displaying intricate data streams, before coalescing into the form of a being that appeared to be made of liquid light. The entity was one of the presiding judges, a race known as the Altheri, whose form was neither fully physical nor entirely ethereal. It was said that they had existed before the first stars were born. Their voices, when they spoke, carried the weight of timelessness. The Altheri judge's voice echoed across the chamber, each word reverberating in the minds of everyone present. "We are here to discuss the actions of humanity," it said, its tone impossibly calm, like the deep hum of a forgotten universe. "Your species has drawn the attention of every power in this galaxy. You have expanded with reckless speed, disturbing the balance that has existed for eons. It is a matter of grave concern." Ilara stood straight, her heart steady. She had prepared for this moment, knowing that humanity would face scrutiny, not for its mistakes, but for its audacity. The judge's form shifted as it continued, laying out a series of accusations against her species. "Your species has spread across countless star systems in less than a century. Your colonies, though young, thrive in places where older civilizations have failed, leaving only dust. You push boundaries that others have long since accepted as impossible to cross. And worst of all, You do this without regard for the established order of galactic existence." Each accusation hit like a blow, but Ilara didn't flinch. She had heard these same words echoed in many forms before, from other races who could not comprehend humanity's drive. The Galactic Court was not interested in the nuances of humanity's survival instinct. To them, humanity's very presence in the galaxy was a challenge to the ancient, established order. A second judge, a towering being of crystalline form, spoke next. "Your species has been noted for its unpredictable innovations. You create technologies that disrupt the foundations of everything we hold sacred. Your artificial intelligence programs are advancing at a pace unseen in any species of your age, and the way you adapt to hostile environments, surviving on worlds where others would perish, is a matter of grave concern." The chamber was alive with murmurs at that. The council's members shifted uncomfortably, exchanging glances that hinted at something deeper, a fear, perhaps, that humanity was evolving faster than even they could comprehend. The accusations continued, each more damning than the last. Humanity had no respect for galactic treaties. They didn't wait for permission to build. They expanded, survived, and innovated at a pace that defied the natural order of the galaxy. And according to the Galactic Court, such behavior could not be allowed to continue unchecked. Dr. Ilara Monroe stood unwavering, knowing that what they saw as recklessness was, to humanity, a testament to their resilience and their drive to survive. The human race had never known a life of idle peace, and it was this very spirit that had carried them from the ashes of their homeworld into the stars. The final words from the crystalline judge rang out, cold and final. "Humanity's actions are a threat to the stability of the galaxy. The court will now hear your defense." The silence that followed the judge's final statement was thick and oppressive. Every being in the chamber seemed to hold their breath, waiting for humanity's response. Ilara Monroe felt the weight of the eyes upon her, the scrutiny of thousands of years of galactic civilization bearing down on her small, fragile human frame. Yet she did not falter. The time had come for humanity to speak not with fear, but with truth. She stepped forward, the soft hum of her boots against the platform the only sound in the room. The assembly's gazes shifted to her as she stood tall, her hands clasped behind her back. Ilara was calm, but inside, her heart raced. The responsibility of representing humanity was enormous. If she failed, if the delegation failed, the consequences would be catastrophic. But if she succeeded, humanity would no longer be seen as a naive, reckless species. They would be seen as a force, one to be reckoned with. Ilara's voice, when it came, was steady, clear, and free of doubt. "Honored judges," she began, her words echoing throughout the vast chamber. "I stand here not to defend humanity's past mistakes, nor to beg for forgiveness. I stand here to speak of who we are and why we exist, why we must continue to exist." There was a pause as the assembly listened intently, some leaning forward. The older races exchanged curious glances. This was not the defense they had expected. Ilara continued, "You speak of our reckless expansion, our refusal to bow to the established order. But what you fail to understand is that humanity has never been able to afford the luxury of standing still. From the moment we emerged on our homeworld, we fought, we struggled, and we survived, time and time again. Our history is one of resilience. Our future is one of hope." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. The judges watched her carefully, their expressions unreadable. "Our species has faced extinction multiple times," she continued. "We have weathered war, disease, famine, and the collapse of our own civilizations. Yet we rise again, every single time. We do not conquer for power. We do not innovate for dominance. We do these things because we must. We do them to survive." There was a murmur among the assembly now. Some seemed to soften, others still skeptical. The vast majority of the galaxy's species could not understand this drive, the urgency, the refusal to accept fate. Ilara's voice took on a deeper, more reflective tone as she moved on. "When we built our first ships and set foot on the stars, We did not do so out of a desire to challenge anyone. We did so because we looked up and saw endless possibilities. We saw a universe teeming with life, with unknowns waiting to be explored. She looked at the judges, her gaze unwavering. You call us reckless. Perhaps that is true. But we are also relentless. We will never stop. We will never back down. If we must adapt to every challenge the galaxy throws at us, we will. If we must break through every boundary, every wall, every limit, we will. Because that is who we are. The chamber was silent now, the tension palpable. Ilara's words hung in the air, a bold declaration to all who had once doubted humanity. There was no fear in her stance, no apology in her voice. The message was simple. Humanity had come to stay. And nothing, not even the might of the Galactic Court, could stop them. The Altheri judge, whose light form had remained still until now, flickered slightly. Interesting, it said, its voice cold but not unkind. We will see if your species can live up to this. Resolve. The silence that followed Ilara's words was unlike any silence she had ever encountered. It was not the silence of contemplation, nor was it one of respect. It was a pause filled with a strange, almost palpable tension, an uncertainty that no one in the chamber could name, but all could feel. The judges, those ancient entities who had seen civilizations rise and fall across eons, remained still. Ilara stood motionless, the weight of her defense hanging in the air. She had spoken of survival, of resilience, and of humanity's relentless push forward. But now, she would speak of something far deeper, the heartbeat of her species. The story of humanity. She began again, her voice steady but with an undercurrent of emotion, is not one of mere survival. It is not a story of endless struggle or of war without meaning. It is a story of hope, hope that we carry not as individuals, but as a collective. Ilara's gaze swept across the assembly, locking eyes with the judges, and then with the hundreds of others gathered in the chamber, alien beings of unimaginable complexity and power. We are not perfect. We have made mistakes. We have fought each other, destroyed what we've built, and nearly torn ourselves apart on more than one occasion. But every time we've fallen, we've risen. Every time. There was something in her words now that touched the minds of those listening. A warmth. A drive. The very essence of what it meant to be human was beginning to seep into the room. Ilara had always believed that it was this spirit that defined humanity, not the technologies they had created or the wars they had fought, but the unyielding hope to reach for something greater, something beyond themselves. She continued, her voice quiet but powerful, when our ancestors first ventured into the unknown. Across oceans, into space, they did so with nothing but curiosity. The human race has always been driven by that simple, yet profound, desire to understand, to learn, to grow. We do not know all the answers. We may never know, but we always ask the questions. We seek. We explore. The chamber remained silent, but there was a shift in the energy. Some of the ancient beings in the audience shifted slightly, their forms flickering as though they were absorbing the power of her words. Ilara could feel it. She had seen it before on Earth, people listening with closed minds, but slowly the words beginning to sink in. The moments when barriers began to fall. It is in the way we learn, she continued, the way we invent, the way we rebuild. We are a species that will always move forward. We will not wait for permission. But that does not mean we do not recognize the value of all life. We do not conquer to rule. We conquer to understand. The judges, for the first time since the beginning of the trial, began to shift. One of them, a being with a shifting, amorphous form that glowed with a pale, ethereal light, spoke. You say you conquer to understand, but you do so at a cost. Many in this galaxy find your presence unsettling, even dangerous. Ilara nodded, fully aware of the fear that humanity's rapid rise had stirred among older civilizations. She was not naive to the concerns they harbored. I understand your fear, she said softly, But fear is not the same as truth. We do not intend to harm. We only intend to explore. Her words lingered in the air, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Humanity's heart beats for the unknown. And that is something none of us can ignore. The air in the chamber grew thicker as Ilara's words settled into the minds of the assembly. The judges remained silent, their thoughts unreadable, yet there was something in the way they observed her. A shift in their focus, a flicker of something that resembled uncertainty. They had expected humanity to crumble under the weight of their ancient judgments. But here was a woman, a representative of a species barely out of its cradle, speaking with the conviction of someone who understood the deepest parts of what it meant to live, to fight, and to survive. Finally, the Altheri judge spoke, its voice reverberating through the chamber, soft yet powerful. Humanity speaks of hope, of progress, of a future that transcends all boundaries. Yet you have disrupted the balance of this galaxy. You have violated treaties. You have expanded without consent. And you have created forces that, if unchecked, could lead to destruction. Ilara met the judge's gaze, unflinching. She knew what they were implying, that humanity's unchecked progress could someday spiral out of control. But what the galaxy didn't understand was that humanity's expansion wasn't a matter of greed or power. It was survival. And survival, as Ilara had argued, was at the very heart of their existence. "We do not seek to dominate," she said, her voice steady, "but to coexist. We are aware of the consequences of our actions, but we cannot stand still. To stand still is to fade into nothingness. You say we violate treaties. True, but those treaties were formed by species who had no place for us, no intention of seeing us thrive. If you demand that we follow rules that do not serve us, then what choice do we have?" There was a ripple among the assembly as they digested her words. The judges exchanged silent glances, and for the first time, Ilara could sense a shift, an opening in the storm of skepticism and fear that had dominated their perception of humanity. The Altheri judge spoke again, its tone heavy. "Perhaps," it mused, "perhaps you do not yet understand the consequences of your actions. We have seen species like yours before, young, ambitious, full of potential. But many of them were reckless, and they fell before they could realize the cost of their desires." Ilara nodded, acknowledging the wisdom in the judge's words. "We are aware, but we will not make the same mistakes. We have learned from our past. We will learn from the mistakes of those who came before us. But we cannot be held back by fear of what we might become. We must shape our own destiny." Another judge, a being with a clouded, shifting form, chimed in. "What if your destiny brings destruction to the galaxy? What if in your pursuit of knowledge, you unwittingly create something that cannot be undone?" This was the question, the heart of the matter. What if humanity, in its drive to understand, became a force too powerful to control? Ilara took a deep breath, weighing her response. This was the moment where words could either heal or break everything. "Then," she said quietly, "we will face the consequences. But we will face them as a species, united, not as fragments of a broken past. We will not shy away from our future, no matter how daunting it may seem." The room was still. The judges were silent, considering her words, the weight of her statement pressing into the air like a final verdict. For the first time since the trial began, there was no immediate judgment, no decision. Instead, the assembly seemed to lean forward, drawn into the conflict that Ilara had stirred. The choice had been made. Humanity would not be silenced. The question now was whether the galaxy would accept them as they were or cast them out. The chamber remained quiet, the weight of Ilara's words hanging in the air like a charged storm. For what felt like an eternity, the judges did not speak. The only sound was the faint hum of the space around them, the energy of a galaxy in motion, a universe that had lived and breathed for eons, now holding its collective breath. The vast assembly, composed of beings so old they had witnessed the rise and fall of entire civilizations, seemed to shift uncomfortably, sensing the magnitude of the moment. Then, slowly, the Altheri judge, the one who had led the proceedings, shifted its form, the liquid light of its body rippling as it extended a tendril toward the center of the room. It flickered for a moment, as though processing the human argument, before the energy seemed to crystallize into a singular, focused beam of light. Its voice, when it spoke, was different. Not cold, not distant, but almost thoughtful. "We have listened to you, human. We have observed your species, your potential, your resilience, your drive. We have seen your history, the scars you carry from countless wars and struggles, and we have seen the strength you draw from those experiences." Ilara stood still, holding her breath. The galaxy's greatest minds, those beings who had shaped the destiny of the universe for millennia, were on the verge of passing judgment on humanity. Would they see them as a threat? A force of nature too dangerous to be allowed to continue their rapid expansion? Or would they understand the truth Ilara had spoken? The truth that humanity was not so easily categorized. "We have also seen," the Altheri judge continued, "your potential for destruction. It is undeniable. Your progress is both wondrous and terrifying. Your innovations, your ability to adapt, to create, to survive, are remarkable. But we cannot ignore the reality of what your species has become. You are a force to be reckoned with, and the galaxy is not prepared for what may come." A second judge, a being whose form was as transparent as glass, spoke next. Its voice was sharp, almost accusatory. "You speak of learning from the mistakes of those who came before you. But how can we trust that your species will not repeat history? How can we trust that you will not become a force that consumes everything in its path, like so many others before you?" Ilara's heart skipped a beat. The galaxy's most ancient races were not easily swayed. But she had anticipated this. She had expected their fear, their reluctance to embrace something as unpredictable as humanity. "We are not perfect," she replied, her voice steady, unwavering. "We are not claiming to be. But we are willing to learn, to change, to grow. We will not repeat the mistakes of the past. But we need your help. We need to build a future together." The room was silent once more. Then, the Altheri judge, after what seemed like an eternity, spoke again. "The galaxy has always operated on the assumption that order must be maintained, that chaos cannot be allowed to reign. But you, humanity, present us with something new. You present us with the possibility of something different." The judge's form shimmered, and the room seemed to grow even stiller. "The decision," the Altheri continued, "is not an easy one. We, the judges, have decided that humanity will be allowed to continue its expansion, but under strict supervision. You will be granted the freedom to grow, to explore, to thrive. But know this. Should you falter, should you prove that your power can no longer be controlled, the consequences will be swift and final." Ilara's heart pounded. The verdict was in. Humanity had been granted a chance. But it came with a warning, a clear and unwavering understanding that the galaxy would be watching. "Your species," the Altheri judge concluded, "will be allowed to continue. But you must prove yourselves worthy of the galaxy's future." The decision had been made. Humanity would continue. The weight of those words reverberated through Ilara like a tidal wave. The chamber was still, the energy of the moment settling like dust after a storm. The judge's verdict was final, but it was not a victory. It was a beginning, one filled with uncertainty, but also with the potential for something far greater than any of them had imagined. As Ilara stood there, processing the reality of what had just transpired, she felt the eyes of the entire galaxy upon her. The Council's decision had granted humanity a chance to prove itself, but it was also a reminder that the path ahead would not be easy. There would be no guarantees, no assurances that humanity's future was secure. One misstep could bring everything crashing down. But for the first time in what felt like forever, Ilara felt hope stir within her, a hope that maybe, just maybe, the galaxy was ready to embrace humanity. The Altheri judge's form flickered again. the ethereal light casting shadows across the chamber. "Let it be known," it said, its voice carrying the weight of finality, "that humanity is now under the watchful eyes of the Galactic Court. The galaxy has granted you this opportunity, but it is not without conditions." The words hung in the air like an unspoken challenge. Every being in the room knew what that meant. Humanity was being given a chance, but the burden was heavy. They had to prove they could exist within the galaxy's vast and ancient order, or risk being wiped from the stars. Ilara nodded, her face resolute. "We understand, and we will not fail." The judges did not respond. Instead, they allowed a long silence to fill the room. It was as though they were waiting for something, as if expecting humanity to make a move, to demonstrate that they were capable of living up to the challenge they had been given. Ilara turned to her team, the human delegation who had stood by her through the trial, all of them knowing what this meant. They had won the right to exist, but now came the real test. Would humanity rise to meet the galaxy's expectations, or would they crumble under the weight of their own ambition? The Althari judge's voice once again echoed through the chamber. "The decision is final. You may go, humanity. But remember this. The galaxy watches. Your every action will be scrutinized. The balance of power has shifted. It is up to you whether that shift is for the better or the worse." As the chamber began to dissolve into the cold vacuum of space once more, Ilara felt the full weight of the moments settle over her. This was the beginning of a new era, not just for humanity, but for the galaxy. The path ahead would be fraught with challenges, but humanity had a choice to rise above the fears and misconceptions that had shaped the galaxy's view of them. With the verdict handed down, the delegation left the chamber, their heads held high, knowing that the future was unwritten. The galaxy had given them a chance, and now it was up to humanity to shape it. As they stepped into the corridors that would take them back to their ship, Ilara looked out into the vastness of space, her mind racing with possibilities. The stars, once distant and cold, now felt closer than ever. Humanity had a future among them, and it would not be silenced.